Welcome to the College Football Insiders. It is playoff week, but that's not really what's been dominating the conversation here over the last few days. And as we enter this new week in this postseason, we were talking Michigan and what's happening there with the Sherrone Moore situation. Last time we were able to chat with you here on the show, a lot's happened there, obviously. Sherrone Moore, the head coach of Michigan, after less than 2 years, is out after there was an investigation there and some evidence turned up that he had an inappropriate relationship with a staff member. And then just minutes, hours later, he ends up getting in trouble with the law for allegedly breaking into a female staffer's home, picking up butter knives and scissors, and threatening to harm himself. Police later apprehended him, and he had a hearing late last week in court. And he's going to be due back in court facing 3 charges, including a felony, later in January, in fact, on national championship week. Also, Michigan, of course, is a coaching search going on. So we got a lot to talk about as we focus in on Michigan right now, bringing in John Talty. Once again, thanks for joining us here on College Football Insiders. I am Brandon Marcello. John, this Sherrone Moore situation, we all know, is just completely out of left field. I would say there's been murmurs about something going on, but just the way it all unfolded on a crazy, crazy Wednesday and the fallout we've seen from this. Now we're seeing Michigan has launched another internal investigation within its athletics department. They've hired a law firm there, which they have worked with several times previously, to look into I guess you would say, the culture of the athletics department and how things have been handled there with the Sherrone Moore situation over the last 2 years. In addition to everything else that's been going on there, to see if there's a quote unquote, maybe a not say quote unquote, but see if there's a lowest common denominator to all of this, which of course could potentially put athletics director Ward Manuel in the crosshairs.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I mean, there are some prominent Michigan boosters that are not the biggest fans of Ward. There, I think, has been, kind of murmurs and scuttlebutt for more than a year now, really, about, like how they felt about him and whether, he has long-standing security at that spot. Some of that stems from I don't know if feud's the right word, but some disagreements between Ward and the previous head coach, Jim Harbaugh. That was, it was well known, I think, within not only Michigan donor circles, but within that athletic department, that those two guys didn't always see eye to eye. People around Jim Harbaugh believe that ultimately played a role in his decision to leave for the NFL and go to the Los Angeles Chargers. They, of course, promoted Sherrone Moore. After Harbaugh left, that was a Ward manual decision. Did not, from my understanding, really look at a lot of outside candidates. So that, I think, puts him back into the spotlight too. But if you just think about the last, what, Brandon, 4 or 5 years, this is an athletic department that has been mired in scandal and drama. And, some of it you can argue has been overblown, but the fact that they keep getting back into the NCAA spotlight, the fact that you've had multiple former coaches receive show cause penalties, you had the whole Connor Stallion sign stealing scandal, and now you have a head coach who has probably one of the biggest falls from grace that I can remember in a long time, not just for his firing, but for his, arrest and what could come for him just in his personal life moving forward. It's unbelievable. So it makes sense to me why Michigan would want outside counsel to look into that. Because I do think one of the critical questions is, if people like you and I could hear rumors and did hear rumors about this more than a month ago, when did Michigan find out? Why could they maybe not corroborate that earlier? And what does that mean for the people involved who did try to investigate this previously?
Yeah, that's the big question. How long did people know about this, and how long was it kept a secret, and how many people tried to keep it a secret? Because as you said, this is something in the industry as journalists we've been hearing murmurs about for the better part of at least 2 months, and then even things even going back further involving Sherrone Moore and his behavior off the field. Of course, I'm sure a lot of people have seen other reports out there from other outlets talking to, for example, an OnlyFans star who says that she was reached out to by Sherrone Moore in some conversations. This is a situation where it's one where you just have to wonder with Michigan, not just the athletics director, but staffers at Michigan, like, how long did they know about something like this? Why didn't they report it? Did they report it? And if so, what happened afterward? That's what this law firm is looking into. Those are the big major questions they're asking of why didn't this all come to light? Why didn't we have the evidence earlier? But also, of course, the handling of this, and in addition to anything else in the athletics department. I was told when I reported this Friday night, late Friday night at CBSSports.com, that this was a quote, open ended investigation by a source who's very well placed there, which means they'll look into everything. They're going to turn over as many rocks as possible to see what's going on there as far as the culture at Michigan. And of course, this is something that could very well affect just how this job is viewed, of course, and we'll get into that here later. But when we see what's happened in Michigan the last 3 to 4 years, and just seems to be controversy after controversy and some scandals, and they've managed to get by fine, of course. But now you wonder, was this the final kind of atom bomb that's going to blow things up to the point where we're completely cut away from the Jim Harbaugh era?
Think if you're Michigan, you certainly hope so, right? I think you're hoping there's not any other bombs kind of lingering out there. But I think that there continues to be. And I think I think what you see in situations like this, Brandon, or not only are you going to have these outside people now being paid by Michigan to look into things, but, people like you and me and other journalists are going to continue to dig into what is happening at Michigan. And I think what's interesting there too is, and this, might tie into some of the stuff moving forward with their coaching search, but what we're seeing at Michigan also is a lot of power at the regent level, and them exerting that power. We saw it play out with the not PE, but it's easier sometimes to just call it PE. But that deal, with the California, which would have injected quite a bit of money into the Big Ten. Michigan being very outspoken, specifically at the regent level. We've seen them get involved at the university leadership level. They've gone through some changes there, multiple in the last 5 years. And so that I think just is an interesting kind of subplot to this situation and how things might move forward. But certainly you're hoping that after everything you've been through, from the science stealing scandal to now this, that there's not going to be anything else still looming out there. But certainly there's rumblings that there could be. And that would be concerning to me if I was a Michigan leader right now.
Yeah, John, as you said, it just seems like everywhere Michigan goes, there just seems to be whispers around there. I was up there 3 weeks ago for the game, and even in the press box, there was whispers about all that. And so many things in a big program like that, when there is one piece of controversy, it seems to splinter out to a bunch of unfounded rumors and then some rumors based in some truth. And as you know, in programs we've been around in the past, that seems to happen when something like this goes on. And so a lot of reporters out there are going about their job trying to find out what's true, what's not. And it's one of those things where it's kind of a bothersome situation because as a program as Michigan, you obviously don't want reporters or anybody going around digging around your program thinking that something's going on because they're liable to potentially uncover something you don't even know about yet when people are going around scrounging around. That's why all these programs always joke like we don't want to be part of an NCAA investigation, even as turning someone else in, because they might come sniffing around here and find something that we're doing incorrectly that maybe we don't even know about. That's
No,
the
I mean,
problem
it's
with these things.
Yeah, it's completely true. I mean, I think everyone has some skeletons in the closet, right? And I think these are some that are very public now, but are they the only ones? I mean, I think that's what people are going to continue to look into. And I think there's still stuff that even if you go back to the sign stealing stuff, like there's still questions that I have that I don't know that have been fully answered. And so, Sherrone Moore was very involved in that situation. Does that make him more viable to go back to and talk to about some of those things? I think he's got bigger questions to deal with right now, but I think that's something that is concerning. And again, like if you're a leader, as Ward Manuel is as the leader of the athletic department, at a certain point it all falls on you, whether you're directly involved or not. And I think that's something that is going to, be a pressing question moving forward. Is like, how is all this happening under your watch? And why is it not being stopped? Why are we continually in the headlines for all of the wrong reasons? I mean, Brandon, going back to that national championship, like probably one of the least talked about national championships because of all the drama around it. Like you even have to wonder as how much of this has been worth it for all of these negative headlines to continue to pop up. It's a challenging time in Ann Arbor right now.
Yeah, most definitely. And we've got our nose to the ground on that. We're going to take a quick commercial break here on the College Football Insiders. But when we return, we're going to talk about the Michigan coaching search because they kind of face soft deadline here. They got the transfer portal opening up January 2nd, and they've got to make some moves. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the College Football Insiders. I'm Brandon Marcello, joined by John Talty and now Matt Zenitz. We're going to continue our Michigan discussion and specifically about their coaching search, which has just begun and is being led right now by Ward Manuel, the athletics director at that place. And it's very early, as I mentioned, Matt, and I know there's been some talk out there, especially about Kenny Dillingham, and there's some stuff I can add there. But what else are you hearing out there, guys? Anything that's kind of piqued your interest in the very early goings here in Ann Arbor?
Big level of unknown right now. This is one where I really don't have a great feel for where it's going to end at this point, and something that's adding to just the uncertainty is the fact that not only do you have an interim president in Michigan right now, but the expectation among industry sources, as I'm sure you guys are getting on your end also, is that Ward Manuel is probably going to be out at some point in the near future. It's just a very complicated situation, not even factoring in just everything with the Sherrone Moore component to go along with that. And it leads to me wondering if that there could be any shot of just a bridge coach for the 2026 season, whether it's Biff Poggi or someone else, and then potentially hitting the reset button or reassessing things come a year from now. By no means am I predicting that that's how it's going to end, but it's something that a couple people have brought up in the last couple of days, just that could see that scenario maybe becoming a consideration, just as complicated as things are right now.
Yeah, one name we've heard here early, at least in the rumor mill, and I know it's been catching fire on social media, and the coaches even had to kind of respond to it himself, is Arizona State coach Kenny Dillingham, who is obviously an alumnus of Arizona State. Been his dream job. He's been pursuing it for a long time, even back when I was covering him at Auburn. And, his name has come up there, and there was a report out there from our 24/7 Sports' Arizona State site saying that they were near a deal. They're close to a deal. I did some digging on that, found out that the day after the regular season finale, Arizona State had presented a contract to Kenny Dillingham, his agent, and his team. And of course, they looked it over and said, hey, here are some other things we want in it, or some things we didn't feel like that were directly addressed. So they sent that back to them. And then late last week, they got a second draft back. And in that second draft, not a lot of the things that they wanted addressed were actually addressed in the positive, at least for them. So potentially the idea of this being close is not necessarily the case. Now, Arizona State might believe that, but the murmurs around those who've been working on this is it's not as close as you think. And that if Michigan were to show serious interest in Kenny Dillingham, and of course I say if, capital, italicized, let's put that out there, because there hasn't been direct contact yet, everybody. I know the rumor mill is going on right now, but at least for as far as I know, there hasn't been direct contact. But if Michigan were to show interest in Kenny Dillingham, he will listen. This isn't him this past weekend saying what he said about loving Arizona State, and he was emotional, because that's all true. He loves his alma mater. He loves it there. His family lives there. Step-parents live there and everything. So, but he's not in a situation where he's going to say, no, I don't want to talk to Michigan, because I think we're getting into a situation here at Arizona State that we might see some public negotiating in the public realm here, because there's more that Kenny Dillingham and his team want there as far as investing in resources at Arizona State. Not necessarily his salary, but the resources there that haven't quite been met, including in this second draft of the contract. And this Michigan opening could be something that maybe helps push that across the line, or maybe pushes him into being a potential serious candidate at Michigan. But of course, as Matt just said, is Ward Manuel going to be leading that search? Is he going to be able to hire someone before a decision's made on him? The transfer portal opens up January 2nd. This is a very, very tenuous situation, and one we haven't quite seen maybe when we look back here in this modern era of college athletics.
Well, I think
It goes back to the same thing, though. You go ahead, John. I'll follow up.
No, I'll just make a quick point. I just think like to what Matt was saying earlier, like the thing you hear over and over again with coaches is that they want alignment, right? And it's impossible for Michigan to have alignment right now. So if you're in a position where you do have a good job, you feel like you're being supported, it lends to you staying versus walking into that situation, even knowing as great of a job as Michigan is, and they have, as much money as anyone in some regard to be able to do what they want to do. But I think especially where the market is right now, if you're a school like Arizona State, you want to do everything you can to hold on to your guys because otherwise, do you want to get in this market right now with the limited options that some people feel are available? Like that's why I think you could see Michigan being used as a leverage play for multiple different coaches and their agents because no school really wants to have to find a new coach right now with the portal about to open up.
The main name that can throw out confidently on my end that I know was of interest to Michigan behind the scenes was Kalen DeBoer. That's obviously not happening now. Kalen put out the statement that he did yesterday that is going to be continuing on at Alabama. And it leads to this just from my standpoint, and I don't know if it's the same thing for you guys, just being all over the place information wise with people throwing out names that could make sense more so than having clarity on names that are true top targets for Michigan. And look, Kenny's one that, from my standpoint, Kenny would be an extremely desirable candidate if I'm Michigan administration based on what he's done there. I would think that would be attractive for someone like a Bryce Underwood, having somebody with Kenny's background as offensive guy, what he's done with quarterbacks, going back to the Bo Nixes of the world and Jordan Travis, even before what he did with Sam Levitt at Arizona State. But there are also some in like the NFL world, for example, that have ties to the school. Could they end up being factors? I don't know right now. But one of the interesting things, just to circle back to the original point that I made, that's come up in the last couple of days is just that idea of a bridge candidate for a year. And one of the elements of that I forgot to touch on earlier is that there are players, including I think even the Bryce Underwoods of the world, that would be supportive of like Biff, for example, taking over for a year, helping them to get through this situation, and then them once again being able to reassess things a year from now. And that maybe could be an important component of this, depending on how things play out the next week or two. If you have not only some players, but some prominent ones like Bryce that are in support of that happening.
Does a bridge coach help with recruiting and the transfer portal here over the next few weeks?
That's the tough part. It's a tough part because how do you, if you're just a 1 year option, how do you recruit players for the next 3 to 4 years? That would be extremely tough. I guess you can theoretically just sell them on the idea of Michigan and being there regardless of how things play out. But that's something that we would obviously, if you were putting together the pros and cons list of that idea, that there would definitely be one of the cons and something that would be challenging for that bridge option if, and I'm emphasizing big time, if they did end up considering that route.
That's the thing. Is a lot of people might try to say, well, this would be like a Frank Reich situation at Stanford. And I would counter argue with no, one, that programs are different. And two, Stanford has a GM that is the face of the program, and Andrew Luck, who was like, players are like, I want to go play for Andrew Luck, who's there selling a dream of, I'm going to get you ready for the NFL. Michigan doesn't quite have that right now. And in fact, we don't know if that entire front office would even be there in the first place, let alone it actually being a figurehead of the stature and name and strength and power that Andrew Luck actually has at a Stanford right now.
I will say Sean McGee, their GM, is well regarded in the industry.
Very well regarded. Yeah. In fact, when this all happened with Sherrone Moore, I had ADs going, they'll be fine in retention because he'll be able to, keep some of those guys there. But as you said, continue, John. I'm sorry.
No, so I think that helps in that regard, and he obviously played a big role in getting, Bryce Underwood. But I think it's a big question as to how you sell the future, and maybe it's, hey, we think no matter what happens, we're going to be here regardless, meaning, Biff and Sean. I think that could be part of the pitch. And I'm here to just serve Michigan, and I'm happy to step back in a year from now if we hire the right guy. I think that's one way of trying to sell it, but it'll be tricky no matter what. I just think the thing that helps them if they decide to do it is that it is Michigan. This is a school that, again, has lots of resources. Of course, a traditional blue blood. It's not like it is a small school trying to sell this dream. It's kids still want to come to Michigan. And you could argue, moving forward, I mean, I wouldn't say that even with all the off the field stuff taken off the table, I wouldn't say Sherrone was necessarily killing it as Michigan's head coach anyway. I think you could sell that things could even be better moving forward under a new head coach with a new vision. So I think there's a way of selling it, but it will be tricky, no doubt.
Do you think at all that Matt Campbell, who left Iowa State for Penn State just about 2 weeks ago, is kicking himself in the behind because he could potentially be in line at Michigan as a candidate?
I think he's in a good situation right now at Penn State. I'm sure Matt Campbell and Matt Campbell's bank account probably happy at the moment.
I did bring up that name to a Michigan booster, and this person was kind of like, we've kicked the tires on that guy in the past. We probably could have had him in the past, and we didn't do it. So, I thought that was interesting. But I agree with Matt. I think he's in a great spot at Penn State. But Matt Campbell might be like, man, I wish I knew if it was going to open up. But I think he's in a great spot.
Yeah, most definitely. So, is there a possibility here that Michigan could be in a Penn State situation where they could go down a list of candidates here over the next 2 to 3 weeks and they're swinging and missing?
I mean, it's definitely
Matt, you wanna take that
possible.
first?
And you can believe that for the high level coaches that a school like Michigan is going to be going after, there is going to be reservations there. There are going to be reservations there. There's going to be pause because of just what they're stepping into and how complicated of a situation that is right now. Under normal circumstances, Michigan is an elite job, one of the top jobs in the country, but at the same time, it's impossible not to be aware of just everything that comes along with that situation right now. And it may lead to some coaches that otherwise would have been interested, maybe not feeling like stepping into that right now, even though just the counterpoint would be it's still Michigan and they're going to be attractive to some high level people.
Yeah, the critical part here in the next few days, week, is to figure out the power dynamic. I know this investigation just started, but I hate to say it. They need to at least do something here on the early interim to say, here's the leader of our athletics department. Here's who's running the search. We have full confidence this is what it's going to look like for the new coach in the near future. So, all right, guys, we're going to take a quick commercial break here. We actually got some breaking news coming in the transfer portal, and that's our next segment. We're going to talk about some very early and big names preparing to enter the transfer portal. Welcome back to the College Football Insiders, and let's go portaling, fellas. A lot of big news breaking here on this early week as we enter playoff week, especially on the quarterback front. First came former five-star quarterback DJ Lagway at Florida deciding to enter the transfer portal. And then just now, actually, while we were on here, the long-expected move of Nebraska quarterback Dylan Raiola entering the transfer portal. I know our Chris Hummer has been all over that since mid-November and was reporting on November 26th that Nebraska was expecting him to explore and potentially enter the portal. We also have Cincinnati quarterback Brendan Sorsby today, not to be forgotten, also saying he's going to enter the transfer portal. So we got two former five-stars in Lagway and Raiola entering the portal when it opens up January 2nd. Gentlemen, I'll start with you, Matt. Which one was the most surprising here? Was it Lagway because of the coaching change just recently?
Yeah, probably. And the decision was made in the last 24 hours. So the Lagway one was, if you want to use the most surprising way of framing it, that one probably, even though anytime there's a coaching change, there's a chance of roster turnover. And that was something that Chris and I were both monitoring as a possibility. But you have DJ, who's now going to attract significant interest, obviously, has had flashes at Florida during the course of the last couple of years to go along with being a former five-star player, even though he was up and down this season. Dylan Raiola, another one who's obviously going to be a hot commodity when it comes to the portal. But I honestly, the most proven one out of the three, maybe Brendan Sorsby. Probably not as big of a name on a national level, but is talented enough and has put enough good stuff on film the last couple of years at Cincinnati that NFL scouts have brought him up as a legitimate possibility to go in the first couple of rounds of the draft if he turns pro, which is still a consideration for him, even though he is entering the portal. Still going through the process of weighing his options right now and determining whether it's the smartest route for him to go, whether it's returning to college for another year or leaving for the draft. And I think some of that will be dictated by just what some other top prospects at that position to decide to do in terms of returning to school or entering the draft and just what the class as a whole looks like. But some of the schools that have come up as early possibilities for him have been Texas Tech. Seems like there's definitely interest from his standpoint in Texas Tech. He also has history with Indiana. Indiana losing Heisman winner Fernando Mendoza coming out of this year. And it seems like that's at least a consideration at this point to go along with Texas Tech and maybe a couple others as far as a potential reunion there, even though at this early point, we would say that Texas Tech has been the most popular one coming up as a possibility for him if he does, in fact, decide to stay in college for another year instead of leaving for the NFL.
Now you look at DJ Lagway and in his situation, you have John Summerall and his coaching staff coming in there. Buster Faulkner is going to be the offensive coordinator. And from what I've heard, the plan was to probably bring in another quarterback to at least compete against DJ Lagway here in the spring, because as we've seen in the past, DJ Lagway has had a history of issues with injuries. He was injured all the way up, going up into the season, in fact, was clear, then not clear, then other issues popping up, and then, of course, this season as well. I think he had the second most interceptions in college football in the FBS this year with 14, and obviously a disappointing season for Florida. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of interest he picks up. Our Chris Hummer at CBSSports.com reported earlier today that the early teams he's been hearing are Baylor, which is close to his hometown of Houston, Duke as well, but you can bet the other players that are usually in the transfer portal market for a quarterback this time of year are going to pop up in there. Miami, Indiana potentially, and some others as well. With Raiola at Nebraska, this was a situation we kind of saw percolating back in mid-November. Dayton Raiola, his younger brother, decommitted from Nebraska. And then, of course, Dylan at the time had a broken fibula. He had not been playing since November 1st, I believe, and had been sitting there kind of figuring out what he was going to do. I know he was very emotional about his injury there. The backup, TJ Lateef, came in, actually performed very well on the road against UCLA. And I'm told that Dylan didn't have very positive reaction to that as well on the sidelines and after the game. And so you heard the rumors, and I'm not going to say rumors, the talk behind the scenes there. Well, it certainly looks like he's looking to leave. And as you guys remember, last year he was thinking about leaving and ended up staying there. This year he had a contract worth about $3.5 million with all things considered, with revenue sharing, I'm told. And, you know, his uncle, Donovan Raiola, also was fired as the offensive line coach just back in late November. So everything had been really kind of building up to this point. When it comes to Dylan Raiola, Patrick Mahomes comparisons aside, where are some programs, or who are some programs that could potentially land him or he would be interested in?
Still in the early stages of figuring that one out. I know Chris has heard Oregon is one that could be of interest to Dylan, but still relatively early in terms of that one. I don't have as much information as substance weight with him compared to somebody like a Brandon Sorsby, for example, so far.
Yeah, Sorsby really flashed this year because he finally had some weapons, right? Finally had some speed on the outside to really help him along there in Cincinnati, and has really improved his stock. As you said, pro scouts really like him. I'd be interested to see what other schools end up popping up big for him. Any other big names out there, maybe not even quarterbacks, that have entered the portal or some that might enter the portal we need to keep an eye on here, fellas?
Not ready to throw all those out there yet, but there are going to be some other prominent quarterbacks that probably end up going in to some well-known guys.
Okay, just rhyme something. Say it rhymes with something. I can't break it.
I'm not a good rhymer. I'm mentally drained right now. Maybe if this was October, I would be able to quickly throw out a good rhyme. I trust John to be way more creative when it comes to that right now than I am. Mentally drained right now from the amount of time that is spent on the phone. It takes away from my creativity.
Well, I think Brandon, you might have already mentioned it, but I mean, certainly there's a lot of speculation around Arizona State QB Sam Levitt. And you mentioned our Arizona State 24/7 site. They've done a great job reporting on that scene already. And him not being at the team banquet. I mean, I think that's one that's been kind of brewing for a while. And I would say,
He's not going to be back
uh,
there. Like it's extremely obvious, and I think far from a secret at this point that he's not going to be back there. We'll see what the market actually ends up in. That's one that there's still a level of unknown with what Sam's true market is. There are some schools that are being floated out right now that I think people are off base and floating out where it's still in the process. And I think Sam's camp may still be in the process of figuring out what his true options are.
well, and I think that's a great point, Matt. And was checking in with someone today at one of the schools we've mentioned here about like, all right, who's the guy? And it's like we're working through the options. Like options are coming in, they're doing their outward, reach out, see who might hit. And so you're seeing a lot of these schools who traditionally we know like transfer QBs, and then even some that maybe entered into the market today. Like they're doing the due diligence right now to go through film to reach out to see who's available. And so it's going to be a little bit of a I sound I'm feel like I'm forgetting things now because I'm at a little bit of a musical chairs, right? There's going to be certain spots available, certain schools that very much want transfer QBs, and there's a certain amount of viable, well-known transfer portal QBs. And so there's just going to be some movement behind the scenes right now. And it's also, to be real here, this is peak tampering time, in which you are gauging who might be willing to hit the market. And I can tell you there's at least two QBs that I have heard of where I know schools are interested in them getting into the portal. We'll see if they ultimately decide to do so.
Yeah, finals just ended at most schools this past week. So the timing here obviously makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. Be fascinating to watch. Also, a new trend I've noticed here the last few days, schools announcing the re-signing of players, like even putting out graphics and videos and photos. It's very much NFL type, right? We're getting to that point. USC announcing Waymond Jordan and another player is returning. South Carolina, quarterback LaNorris Sellers, which was a big pull for them to get back this year. Malik Washington at Maryland was a big one. John, you know very well that. Starting as a true freshman, put up some big numbers there. Are we going to see more things like? I'm sure we are, because now people are going, oh, this really hits. We're going to start doing this. I think we're going to see a lot more of that this week.
That's a good
Well, I
job by
think part
John
of
on Malik, where there were definitely some schools around the country monitoring that one and was not some sort of obvious deal in terms of Malik and his future at Maryland. And that's a big win for Mike Loxley and that program to be able to keep him there. So that's one. I obviously, and John, you can take it from there, but that was one that felt like it was notable because there were some schools monitoring that situation. And Waymond Jordan, for example, part of why that made sense in terms of getting out there was not only Waymond's future at USC in terms of, I guess, eliminating any thought of him potentially going to the portal, but Waymond also had the possibility to enter the draft. So it also cleared up just he's not turning pro, not entering the portal. We'll be back at USC for next season. So that one was a little bit different compared to somebody like Malik, who was true freshman, and the only option would have been for him to go into the portal.
I know some fans don't like it, and people roll their eyes at kind of the "I'm coming back" announcements. But I think they are valuable to the schools because they are sick of probably getting asked over and over again, "Is so and so going to stay?" And I think you mentioned earlier, Brandon LaNorris Sellers. I mean, that's a question that has hung over that the entire season, really. Is he? I mean, beginning of the year, we thought maybe declaring for the draft, right? And then it was
Yeah.
when things started to maybe not go super well, is he going to try to restart somewhere else? And so I think, again, fans are like, man, this is not the college football I love. And I get it. I understand why they don't love it. But I think it's good for schools to end the speculation and try to be in some ways transparent of this guy's coming back. We have him signed to a deal. Please stop asking us questions about whether he's coming back or not. I think that's really the
Also,
primary thing for it.
stop tampering, though. That's not going to really stop
Yeah.
anybody from tampering. I'm just waiting till the day, you know how like with movie trailers, they started releasing teasers for the teaser, like a 3-second teaser. At what point we're going to enter that age where we go, here's a teaser to the decision coming up for this player. You can bet that's coming. But
Oh yeah.
personally, I like it. I like that they're making these announcements the way they are. I mean, it takes some work off of Matt Zenitz's plate, at least, because he breaks every single piece of news when it comes to the transfer portal, coaching carousel,
I
NFL,
wouldn't say
space exploration, anything. And it takes a little bit off his plate. So I'm happy from that regard.
I appreciate that.
Matt Zenitz, half asleep, still working his ass off, though. Much more coming up on the College Football Insiders, including what was going on at the Heisman Trophy ceremony and especially what happened after dark. It's the College Football Insiders. We're talking Heisman Trophy and Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza, who was the favorite after that fantastic, marvelous performance in the Big Ten championship game, which John, you were at and got to see firsthand, flipped kind of pretty much the odds in Vegas overnight, or actually just in an evening, because Diego Pavia, Vanderbilt's quarterback, was the favorite entering the weekend, and Fernando Mendoza with that fantastic performance in the upset of number one Ohio State ends up being enough not just to lift him over Diego Pavia, but just pretty much crush him in the voting. It was not close. I was expecting it to be a little bit closer.
I was pretty surprised, honestly. I thought it was going to be close too. I ultimately went with Mendoza in my Heisman vote, but I went back and forth on it. I thought it was very close, and I thought, it might be one of the closer Heisman races that we saw when it came to the final numbers, and they were not close at all. So that was, I think, a bit surprising to me, but I do wonder how much, just maybe how voters feel about Diego factored into that, because I think certainly his reaction to not winning, which I'm sure you want to get into in a second, Brandon, and then the reaction to his reaction seemed to indicate to me that some people just maybe don't love Diego and his antics, and maybe like Fernando's story and his personality and the way he wins a little bit better than how Diego likes to go about things.
The Big Ten title game locked it up for me and made him the clear choice, at least for me. So hey, had him one, had Pavia two, and then actually had Jacob Rodriguez number three just on my ballot. The good thing for Indiana moving forward is, first of all, you not only have Kurt Signetti locked up for the foreseeable future, you now have Brian Haynes, the defensive coordinator, who was garnering some external interest, has gotten interest for even head coaching opportunities in the last couple of years. Now get a new deal done with him, or he's going to be a piece of that moving forward. You're keeping that staff intact. We're able to keep the head strength and conditioning coach, Derek Goings, one of the top up-and-comers in that world, away from USC, going back to earlier this year. But also from a player perspective, when you have somebody like Fernando Mendoza go out and win Heisman and do something that's never been accomplished in school history, and just see a player. Obviously this doesn't go unnoticed with other players around the college football world. Just what he did this year, seeing someone go out and do that, it makes Indiana all of a sudden an even more attractive destination or landing spot if you're going into the portal. So even though they're losing some key players like Fernando, for example, they've made it realistic now with what they've done the last couple of years, including this season, obviously, to where that's all of a sudden becoming a destination place and makes it realistic to all of a sudden maintain this, sustain this for moving forward. Like, this is something that, even aside from just the success this season, is going to benefit them for moving forward now.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
Diego
to
Pavia
Matt's
got
point,
189. Well, I was going to say Diego Pavia got 189 first place votes. I voted him first in mine, just because what he did at Vanderbilt in a program like Vanderbilt was marvelous. Now, I don't agree with what he said immediately after the Heisman Trophy ceremony, where he said, "quote F all the voters, but family for life," and was out partying and then doing that on social media, and then sent out some apology of some sort the next day, but not very Heisman-like from him. But I'm sure he'll be hosting a podcast in the next 4 to 5 years.
I heard that he specifically aimed that message at Matt Zenitz. So sorry, Matt. He is specifically mad at you for not voting for him.
Hey, the good thing for Diego Pavia, so obviously is a great story in terms of the college part of it, but hey, he has done enough good stuff at Vanderbilt the last couple of years, including this season, that just talking to NFL scouts, he's put himself in a position now where it does have a chance to be a draft pick. So, whereas going back to the early part of his time at Vanderbilt, I think people would have questioned that a little bit, just whether he had a NFL upside or the capability to be NFL player. He's put himself in a position now where it does have a realistic chance to get drafted and to continue his playing career beyond just college.
We'll see. Much more after this.
Hey, I'm just passing along what scouts have said. That's all I'm doing.
College Football Insiders. I'm Brandon Marcello, John Talty. There's a lot more going on out there, believe it or not. The coaching carousel was pretty revved up this week. We had the second most tenured head coach in the FBS retire, and it's not even above the fold, as they would say in the old newspaper days. This headline got buried. Kyle Whittingham retiring from Utah after their bowl game coming up. And Kyle Whittingham, my goodness, has won a lot of games at Utah, had that place rolling. And now defensive coordinator Morgan Scaley, who was the interim in waiting, they named back in July 2024. He will, in fact, step in and be the permanent head coach as Kyle Whittingham steps away in January. And, I will say this, credit to Kyle Whittingham going into this year. They had a disappointing 2024 season, right? And so what does he do? He's like, I need to change a little bit. So they changed the entire offense. They brought in a new coordinator, obviously brought in his quarterback as well, Devin Dampier, and that offense exploded, and it put them in contention in the Big 12 going into the final few weeks of the regular season. And that's a credit to Kyle Whittingham saying, hey, I got to change. We're going to do things a little bit differently. And the offense, as he said back in July to me, I was like, I don't know. He's an older coach. I don't know if I should believe an older coach stuck in their ways. He's like, this offense is going to look a lot like what you saw with Urban Meyer way back in the mid-2000s and late 2000s at Utah. And sure enough, it was pretty darn explosive and exciting and up-tempo at times. So happy retirement to Kyle Whittingham. That one didn't shock you, did it, John?
No, my at CBSSports.com, we had to do those preseason predictions, right? And my preseason prediction for the Big 12, bold prediction, I guess it was that Utah would win the Big 12 and Kyle Whittingham would, ride off into the sunset on his motorcycle and retire. So halfway there, almost there. I mean, they were the team that I liked a lot and ultimately just couldn't get over the hump. But it's been long rumored. He had an incredible ride. One of my favorite, I think, coaches, from afar. I've never really spent a lot of time around him, but I don't know. There's something cool about him. Just like tough-nosed dude, just old school. And I think it was fun to see him adapt and try to go for it, one last time. So I wonder if this is it. Could he reappear somewhere else? That I think is something to maybe to watch. But certainly his time at Utah's over. And, this is a long plan passing the baton to Morgan Scalley.
Yeah, he's an incredible coach. I mean, heck, he would do an incredible job at Michigan, but I just don't know if he wants to stretch his career that long, especially in college football right now. Jim Knowles, the former Ohio State defensive coordinator, is going for a national championship a year ago, then went to Penn State, had disappointment. Now he's in the SEC at Tennessee, replacing Tim Banks, who was fired after being a Broyles Award finalist a year ago. Now he's going to Auburn as a co-DC. It's a little musical chairs here. Jim Knowles in the SEC. How do we think that's going to work out? I think it's going to be good. I'll tell you that much, but it's going to take a couple of years. His system usually takes that long to get involved. Much more College Football Insiders on our YouTube page and CBSSports.com. Thanks for joining us.